All right. Here we are. Am I live? I think I'm live. Yeah, we are. Okay. Welcome. If anyone ever watches this, which they probably won't, but considering I have plans to upload this to a VODs channel, if I actually stick to this series for an extended period of time, maybe people will come back and watch episode 1. In which case, hello, how are we all doing? I've But yeah, this is the first episode. I say. Oh, it's what up? Hey, don't worry. Thanks for the sub. It's the first. This is the first in a hopefully long-lasting series of streams in which I simply do game dev. And I'm going to increase the zoom a bit just so it's a bit more visible for the stream. I think 200% is probably fine. Do I want to go further than that? Like 220. I don't know. I'll decide what I want to do. Anyway, this first stream is kind of just like I'm going to be testing out layout and stuff. Because I'm not a huge... I don't really know what I want to do with all this bottom screen real estate yet. Currently, I just have chat and notifications there, but it's kind of a bit too much space, I think. Anyway, the agenda for tonight, and it's going to be... I'm probably only going to stream for about an hour, is my plan. I want to do an hour stream every day for pretty much as many days of the year as I can. I want to aim for... I think my target goal this year is going to be 300. I want to get 300 streams in of game dev for a minimum 1 hour, potentially more if I feel like it. But 300 days is my target out of 365. I'm setting that right now. I probably shouldn't babble on for too long because I want to use this hour to actually do stuff. So yeah, my Visual Studio. Okay, so I guess first things first. I am planning on using the next year to build more or less an alpha of the game that I want to set up. Or as much of an alpha as I can is the target. Now I get 300 days, 300 hours. It's not a insane amount of time. I don't know how much I'm actually going to be able to set up, but we'll try to do a decent amount. And if I'm actually enjoying this, I'll probably will invest more time into it, but that goes. I'm not building off of nothing. I do have something to work off of now. So you're gonna see we're gonna have some stuff here. The main purpose for this stream is I want to review some of my code because it's all about 3 to 4 years. It's about 4 years old, this code. It's written from back when I kind of had no freaking clue what I was doing. So I want to review a bunch of it, rewrite anything that I think is awful, and try and update stuff. Now, the biggest thing, actually, that I do really want to update, if I spin the game up and give me just 2 seconds, because I know there is a... Maybe if I actually start the game. If I spin the game up here, what I do know is that the game does not play properly without VSync. And it's to do with how I've set up the update script. So that's kind of going to be the first goal. I mean, we're going to review existing code, and I want to try and update my physics so it runs frame rate independent. VSync independent as well. I don't know why turning VSync on does anything. I assume it's because it locks the frame rate to a max probably. but most of what I have set up currently is built around is built around these physics. But if I turn this off, we'll see that it all runs like way too fast. So I'm gonna try and get everything set up properly. Now I can do a quick walkthrough of what we currently have. So I have a character. The game that we're building is a platformer. We can, move left, right. We can jump up and down. You can short hop if you tap the space bar, or you can jump a lot higher if you hold it. And the game currently is called Mage, and part of that is that your character will cast spells. We have a select amount of spells to cast at the moment. I think I have 5 set up. Yeah. So we'll see here in a second. So the current spells that I have set up on my keyboard at the moment is the pea shooter, which is this little guy. And this is your basic just shoot projectile. You'll see my mana in the top left is going down. The pea shooter is pretty cheap. I think it costs 5 mana per cast. But, all these numbers can be tweaked, whatever. My second spell is a dash. It's pretty straightforward. It dashes. If you use it in the middle of the air, it locks your vertical movement. It's very Hollow Knight style dash. Probably a little different on like the distance and speed and whatnot, but again, to be tweaked. My third ability is this jump. So there's no animation for it, obviously, but if I hold down the button after I think that's a 1 second delay, my character springs up into the air like quite high. And then the one I showed off earlier is this one. So there's a wall. We can basically deploy walls that you can then also jump on top of. Bit more expensive. You can see we've got this little particle effect on the ground that shows you where the walls are going to spring out. Probably the most complicated spell that I've built so far. And the code for it is no doubt an absolute mess. And then probably the most flashy looking spell that I built at the moment is the flamethrower. So if I channel the flamethrower for a little bit, we can see we can shoot out a massive spray of fire, and that will ignite the dummies when it touches them. It deals a crap ton of damage. I mean, right now it deals damage like every frame, basically, I think. It's checking for that collision. You can shoot it in different directions, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so those are the spells I currently have set up on this. Now, I'm going to pull the code back up because we're going to do a lot of boring-ass code review. And I'm going to go through just one script at a time. So I'm going to close a lot of these first, actually. Now, I'm not a particularly fantastic programmer. And I was definitely even worse of a programmer when I wrote this. So I have gotten a bit better, but I would say that a lot of my programming knowledge is not fantastic. And it's even worse when it comes to Unity, but we'll take a look at a bunch of this stuff. So probably the most of the logic is contained within the player class. I'll quickly show the entity class. So in the entity class, we have this damage number object, and this is like the little, like when we shot the dummies, the like little numbers that popped out. That's what this corresponds to. And then, we have this like number particle. And then every entity is able to take damage. It can be set on fire. And I guess that's it for the moment. I haven't put too much in here yet. So all entities, whether they're enemies or not, can have these two properties at the moment. They can take damage and they can be set on fire. It's pretty simple stuff. Of course, the intention would be to add whatever status effects or whatever else you want to add to this entity class, and it gets applied to pretty much anything that is interactable in the game, more or less. Any like I guess, character that you can deal damage to. And there's nothing too interesting here. The take damage function just instantiates that object, the little number that flies off. It gives it a set speed. And it sets the number that it actually shoots out as well. Damage is equal to the damage that you pass in. And then the set fire is going to check if we're already on fire. If we are, then reset the timer. So I believe fire ticks for 3 seconds in this game. I mean, we have this ticks value actually that we use to set. So when we get to the flamethrower class a little later, you'll see this how long the entity is actually burning for is configurable. I think I have it set to 3 seconds. Or 3 ticks, I should say. Now, the way that Unity works for a lot of this delayed stuff is you use the start coroutine function. So you'll see in this case we have this burn. Basically, this function that returns an IEnumerator, and that will just determine like how often it runs, more or less. So it uses this return wait for seconds to determine how long you want to wait before running it again, basically. So in this case, it will keep running until the count is equal to the ticks. Okay, cool. And then you'll take damage, and again, it'll come up here and it'll run this function. Now, I have a physics class. It's worth noting that there is nothing in this physics class. And the reason this is because this was probably the very last thing that I was planning on doing before I stopped working on this project. Basically, all the physics that is currently in the game is assigned to this player class, and this player class is pretty big, and we'll go through it in a bit. My intention was to pull it out into a separate class, this physics class, and this way you could add it to multiple things, and pretty much the plan is that like every entity is going to have physics, and then you can configure the physics per entity via these serialized fields. Yo, what's up, Scott? How you doing? If you don't know, in Unity, you can assign this serialized field tag onto your variables in a class. And if I pop back over to Unity real quick, let's see if I have do I have a physics script? I do. So we can see here that we actually have this gravity and drag configurable fields on the right. It's a bit small. I wonder if I can, maybe I'll make this, doesn't actually make it bigger. Can I zoom in? Okay, I'll take a look at that later and see if I can get that to be a little more zoomed in a bit. But yeah, you can see that like they have these configurable values here, and these will be set once you actually start running the game. But if you run the game and stop it, you can change these values and run the game again. And it's basically just an easier way of updating these values in the scripts rather than having to like come back in here and like manually define these values in the constructor or whatever. And the other advantage as well is that like wouldn't make sense for this physics script probably, but if you're using like other scripts that you're going to assign to a bunch of different things, you can have these values be variable depending on what thing it's assigned to. So that's kind of the advantage of that. Okay, now what do we have? These are just getters, so these return the values of whatever is assigned to this. And then, again, nothing actually in here at the moment, because I didn't get around to doing it. Now, the player script is the bulk of what is written for this project so far, so I will go through it. I should have filled out my water bottle because I'm going to get so parched while talking an absolute shit ton. But basically, we define a whole bunch of key codes, and these are just the keys that do the actions we want to do. So you'll see I have a left key, right key, up key, down key. Those are all pretty straightforward. The jump key is spacebar. And then we have a bunch of spell keys. Now, I currently just have these assigned to QWERT, but they could technically be anything that I want. And the biggest upside of having these be configurable is so that if you're doing controller mapping for your game, when the player goes into the options, the settings or whatever, and goes to the like controller mapping screen, when they like click on an action, like say they want to change the jump from like spacebar to W, then, you know, they click on the jump thing, and then they press W to set it to W. And all we're doing on our end is we're just updating what this key code is. So that's like the big upside there. It allows you to just configure and remap all your key inputs, which is just, you know, typically good thing to have in your game. Configurable inputs are just generally good. So that's about it for that. There's not a lot, but like there would be more in the future. Like obviously we don't have like a pause menu key, but like, you know, all this kind of stuff would come later. I have spells. So these are the actual spells that we assign to each key. So like when I press the key for spell 1, it should go and execute the spell 1 spell. And again, this is another layer of configurability where in this game, the intention is to allow it so that the player can configure what spells they have available. So not only can they change what the spell keys are, but they can change which spells are on which key. And so that's what all these are for. Now we have some physics values here. We have jump force, jump height, acceleration, max speed. They're reasonably self-explanatory, but we'll get to them in a bit later. And we have just a bunch of general like player statistics and whatnot. So we have... Yeah, actually, I'm not going to go through most of this stuff. You can a quick read if you want, but it's all pretty straightforward. Okay. Now, I guess I'll go over some quick things in terms of these types, because some of them are Unity types. A vector 2 is it's a vector, if you're familiar with either mathematics or game dev. This is basically a two-dimensional value, and it determines, in this case, it's going to determine what direction or how far we should move each frame and what direction we're moving in. So if we were to give it, like if this vector 2 were to be 2, 2, and in the next frame, we would move like 2 pixels right and 2 pixels up, for example. Or it could be like negative 2, 2, or whatever. If you're working in 3D games, then you typically make use of vector 3s instead of vector 2s, but the game is a 2D platformer, so we typically don't need to worry about vector 3s, thankfully. Technically, you can use them, especially if you're doing some kind of like 2.5D game where it's a side scroller, but you have 3D elements, then you might want to use vector 3s for stuff still, but as far as I'm concerned, that's not really what I'm going for. It's a bit outside of my expertise at the moment. It would be something maybe I'd look into in the future. These raycasts correspond to... So a raycast is basically just a line that you shoot. It's a ray. So in this case, these raycasts correspond to lines that shoot out of the player model. So the player is going to have a hitbox. It's just a rectangle that corresponds to the player. And says, the floor's below me. Or like when the bottom side of the hitbox hits the floor, stop, basically. And these raycast hits are the lines that shoot out of my hitbox. And they're just going to hit other things and tell me how far away I am from other stuff. And then lastly, layer masks. Every hitbox in the game can be given a layer mask. So for example, if I pop back to Unity real quick, you'll see like this big rectangle on the ground here. This upper side, I don't remember how... Yeah, basically this entire hitbox is given a layer mask of ground, I believe. Or it might be the upper side of the hitbox. It's been a little while since I've done this, so I can't exactly remember. Where's my box collider here? I'm like taking a peek through to see if I can find where the layer mask actually gets assigned. Here it is, layer wall. Okay, we can see right here. So it's given a wall layer. And that's probably just because I've literally reused the same platform that I used for like the wall thing as well. But all this is going to say is that this hitbox is a wall hitbox. And so when we use our raycasts, you also give it a layer mask to use as well. And that just says what it's allowed to collide with. So in this case, like the wall layer mask, if I fire a raycast that's set to the wall layer mask, then it will only stop when it hits a wall. Otherwise, it'll just shoot off infinitely. It can shoot off through other layers totally fine. I have a script reference to physics, but as we can tell, there's nothing in the physics script. Again, all the physics code is in the player script at the moment. At some point, I'm going to move it all out, but I haven't done it yet. We have a bunch of values. These kind of correspond to a lot of the private stuff. Oh, actually, sorry, these are just getters. So if these values need to be used by other scripts, then we can grab them from here. Okay, and now finally we're getting, or we're almost there. We got a constructor. There's nothing too interesting, actually. I guess the things that I will note here, this is where we assign what keys get assigned to what. In an actual game setting, these would be like the default controls. And then in your settings screen, you'd want to allow the user to be able to basically swap out what these values are. And then finally, we're adding spells to the player. So this is adding spell scripts. And we're assigning spells to these like spell slots, basically, we have. So in this case, the spells I have assigned are P-Shooter, A1 Dash, A2 Jump, F3 Flamethrower, E1 Wall. And we have a few more up here as well. I have a Heal. I have a Chain. The Chain's actually pretty cool. I might show that in a little bit. Fireball. And I think we've seen all the other ones. Pretty straightforward. Now, I won't go too much into the naming right now. Maybe a little later. But I will continue. This is setting the layer masks. And yeah, setting our health and mana values as well. Okay, now I am the kind of programmer that likes to write a lot of comments. I'm typically very verbose if I'm doing personal projects. I like to make code that is very legible, and that even if you're not particularly experienced with programming, you can kind of just read the comments and typically figure out what's going on. I know some people really hate the level of commenting that I like to do. I get that a lot in just my own work. But is what it is. I prefer more than less. Okay, so this is the update function, and the update function gets ran every single frame that Unity is running, or the game is running. And this is basically what's causing the issues that I mentioned with the frame rate, with the physics kind of being variable depending on if I have VSync on or off. It's to do with the fact that I'm running all my physics out of this update function. It should be getting run out of a Foxed update, out of fixed update. This is a much better function to use, and it will run the physics the same frequency no matter what your frame rate is. And I could swap it to this. The problem is that I get really janky physics stuff that I'm going to have to work through. So I will probably leave that for tomorrow or maybe the day after to look at this. But this is one of the first things I want to do is I want to swap my physics from being run in the update function to the fixed update function, and also getting it to work properly, because I'll do it a little later and we'll see that it kind of doesn't work at all, unfortunately, which means I probably haven't written it very well. Now, the first thing we do in the update is we update our the distances, I believe. Oh, no, edges of the play hitbox are used throughout the script. Now, I guess my first question is, why am I even running this in the update script? And I think the answer is there's literally no reason I need to. So, the first thing we're going to do is remove this code and put it in my constructor. Okay, and here we go. And we're going to see a lot of dumb shit like this, where, like I said, I wrote this a long time ago, and I was not very good at programming when I wrote it. But yeah, there's literally no reason I would need to update these values every frame because they're always going to be the same. So we just run it once in the constructor. Okay, so that's that. Now, this is what I thought we were using. This is what I thought this was doing up here, which is the raycasts, basically. Now, what we'll see here is a series of box casts from the edge of the place hitbox legacy raycast. So I was apparently using some previous Physics 2D raycast here rather than a box cast, and for whatever reason I decided that it wasn't good. I don't know why. We'd probably have to uncomment it and find out, but it appears I'm using a box cast instead. Oh, actually, I do know why. Okay, I think boxcast is better. So the difference between raycast and boxcast is raycast is literally like a one-dimensional line that fires from the exact point that you defined. So in this case, I believe the origin of the point is this bottom vector 2. However, I don't actually want to fire like a one-dimensional line. And in fact, this is where I'm going to pull out MS Paint. And I kind of want... Let me just figure out how I want to put MS Paint in. And we'll probably... I mean, I know it's cliched because it's the Pirate software thing, but I'll also use the black background just so it doesn't flashbang everyone. Okay, MS Paints. Actually, do I already... I think I already have one that I can use. 1 second. Here it is. Okay. Yeah, alright, that'll do. So I'm gonna pull this down here. 1 second, bear with me. And then I'll drag the chat to like here. Or, no, I changed my mind. I'm gonna put that there. And then the chat can go over here. Okay. And last thing. Alright. That'll do. Okay. So we can see I've got like a little box here. Now what I'm going to have to do is set up a pretty big brush because otherwise you ain't going to be able to see shit. Where is my width? Alright. That is too wide. Okay. So here is my character with the raycast method, which if I pop over to here, so I believe what this commented out function does, this physics2d.raycast function, if this is my player, then it's going to fire a line that goes directly down like this, right? In fact, let's use a different color. This is what it fires. And so it's looking for like the ground, yeah? So let's say that I have ground here. It's going to fire straight down and it's going to hit this and it's going to go, hey, I hit something here. And it's going to tell me that distance. So that's what this down hit is. It will let me determine the distance between my players, the bottom of my player's hitbox and the floor. Now, what I swapped it to is this box cast instead. Which actually, rather than firing a line, it's going to fire a rectangle, right? And so it'll fire a rectangle down like this and be like, hey, look, you hit something. And so the main reason we do this, which is pretty easy to demo actually, is that what happens with the raycast, I'm firing directly out of the middle. But what happens if I have a bit of ground like this and a bit of ground like this, and I have a nice gap in the middle here, yeah? Well, now if I fire my raycast directly down, it's going to go straight through the bottom and it's going to not hit anything, right? Because I have like this pit here, this tiny pit. Now in normal like game like level design, it doesn't really matter because you're probably, as a level designer, you're not going to make tiny gaps like this where your player can like kind of walk over them. Doesn't really make sense, right? To set up gaps like that. The reason that this can come up in gameplay anyway, and if I swap back to Unity real quick, I've hidden the wrong thing. The biggest reason that this can happen already in like, even in just like my tiny demo. Okay, I fell through the floor. That's cool. I've not seen that before. Okay. We're falling through the floor now, and I don't know why. I don't think I changed anything, did I? Maybe I changed the layer mask on this. Maybe it wasn't wall. Okay, I think this was supposed to be ground. Hold on. Oh, I have 2 hitboxes. Oh, what do you know? I do have a ground one. Why am I just falling through the floor now? Unity, this is not helping me. Oh, I bet it's because I'm not... It must have been because I moved that thing that was being called edge of the place hitbox used throughout the script. Why can I not do this in my constructor? Okay, I don't know right now. I'm going to move it back, though. Okay, anyway, you guys can't see that, but it doesn't really matter. Give it 2 seconds. I'm going to run this again. Just to kind of go over this point, right? Okay, so we're like, all right, well, Snowy, you're saying. Snowy, you're not going to set up platforms where you can, like, have this tiny gap that your player can't fall through. Well, here's my counterpoint. What if I make a spell that allows my user to create platforms? And then I make this tiny-ass gap, and then I allow my player to fall through the middle, right? It wouldn't make any goddamn sense. So that's how that can pop up in a game, right? Is if I allow my user to make terrain, then shit like that can happen, unfortunately. So there's that. I also, incidentally, while doing this, figured out how I set up multiple hitboxes on the Unity object. So that's cool. Because I have one big hitbox, which I don't know why, but then I have 2 smaller hitboxes. And I wonder if a lot of my problems would be solved if I just made this ground hitbox bigger. But regardless, that's how they work. I can probably remove the box collider from this, which is what I'm going to do, actually. Because I think we're not using it. Yeah, that should be better, I think. Okay, I don't know. I'm guessing, but that's fine. So let's get back to MS Paint here, right? So the solution to this issue is pretty simple. It's using the box collider thing that I mentioned earlier, where instead of shooting a line downwards, we're going to shoot a box. And now this box is going to hit here, and it's going to hit here, and it's going to stop. And it's going to be like, hey, look, there's ground below you. Don't fall down. Now, what this also means, like another thing that this means is that like let's say this is the platform, and like let's say there's no platform on the right. I'm still not going to fall down here because I'm going to shoot this box collider and it's going to collide here and it's not going to let me drop. So you can kind of like hang on the edge. And to be fair, a lot of 2D games do this anyway. This is like pretty standard behavior. Like if you play like Hollow Knight or anything, your knight can really walk quite a ways off the edge before you actually fall down. I'd say it's probably the standard platforming behavior. Some games do make it that like if your character is like halfway off, you'll fall down, but what you'll see is that like your character will then overlap with the wall here. So I would say it's not too common, but some games do it, I think. It wouldn't surprise me. Okay, so that's that. Let's pop back into Visual Studio. Bing, bang, bong. Cool. Okay, now for whatever reason, my stuff stopped working when I removed this, when I moved it up into the constructor. I don't know why. It's probably because this is a position, and it depends on the position of the player at any given frame. Yeah. Okay, that's actually what this is. So if I put it in the constructor, it picks up the player's position at the very start when I click the play button, and then it never updates. So what we're actually doing here is we're just updating where the position of the edge of the player's hitboxes are, rather than having to call this, or rather than having to construct this vector anytime we want to do code. Okay, so that makes sense. Well, there we go. Okay, looks like 4 year ago me wasn't a complete dumbass, like I thought. I say that, and now we're going to move on to the very next section of code, which is 2 if statements that have the exact same condition and do different things. Now, this is dumb, and unlike this stuff up here, there is literally no reason we would ever do this. This should all be in the 1 if block. I do not know why that was there. If I had to guess, it's because these if blocks either used to have different conditions, or yeah, that'd be like the only thing I would guess. I don't know why else that would happen. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, anyway, so we're going to check for player inputs. So every frame, the game is going to check, okay, what keys is my player holding? And then based on what keys we're holding, we're going to go and perform a bunch of actions. So we'll get to that in a second. And then after that, we're also going to calculate the physics for the player. So we calculate gravity, we calculate drag, we calculate max speed. So if the player's speed's going too fast, we cap it. And then we also do a bunch more checks. We check if we've hit a ceiling. We check if... we don't check if we hit a ceiling. We check if we're going to hit a ceiling next frame. We check if we're going to hit a wall next frame. We regain some mana. And then the last thing we do after all of this is we actually move the player. So that's the end result. Which is the result of gravity, drag, top speed, ceiling check, wall check. All of this stuff determines what is my next position going to be. And check inputs does the actual actions. Now, speaking of check inputs, we're going to get to it right now. If my input is the left key, set my speed to be set my speed to be minus acceleration. And then also set my facing position to be left. So in this case, face right false just means we're facing left. If I press the right key, do the opposite. Increase my speed by positive acceleration. And face right is true. We're facing right. Now, I have 2 checks for jumping. So this first one checks if we're already jumping, and the second one is we're initiating a jump. And the reason that we have 2 separate physics sections for this is because if you think about in a game where you're playing, the character, when you press the jump key, jumps really high. Or like the initial, you don't like accelerate into a jump. There's like a burst of speed, and then you slowly ascend past that. You stop having force being enacted on you. And the reason for that is because obviously if in real life, imagine you jumped off the ground, all the speed you're getting is from that initial jump. And you don't like gain additional speed past that. You're actually losing speed because of gravity as you enter the air. Now in video games, it doesn't quite work like that for the reason that I want to make it that I can do a short hop or I can do a really big jump if I hold down the spacebar. And the way that we allow that to happen is if we're holding down the spacebar, then we basically ignore gravity. We basically say, hey, keep going up. And then we also check that we haven't exceeded a certain height yet. So that's how that works. A lot of video games will do this. Probably not in the same way I've done here. Like, this is a very simplistic doing it, but like if you've played like literally any platformer game, just about, some platform games don't allow you to have like a variable jump height, but it's pretty standard, I think, for the most part, and this is how they do it. You can just choose to ignore gravity by holding down the jump button. That's basically all this does. The initial jump, I guess the other thing to note that it does is we actually check that we're on the ground when we're initiating an initial jump. And I don't think I need to do anything else. Sets our jumping status to true. That's how we check for the sustained jump here as well. Which basically just avoids us having to check this down hit .distance, but we could do this up here, like rather than using this jumping value. Actually, no, we kind of do need to know for other reasons. Anyway, I'll skim over that. Not too important. And then the other thing we do is we also check if we're casting spells. So the first thing we do is we check, are we already in the middle of casting a spell? Because if we are, don't allow the user to cast another one. So if the player is not currently casting a spell, then check if we're pressing any of the keys that allow us to cast a spell. And if we are, then cast the spell. That's pretty straightforward. This cast function comes from the spell class, so we'll get down to that a little later. Nothing too interesting here. I can probably make this a case switch statement, I think, instead of a bunch of else ifs. Yeah, I absolutely can. I don't know why this isn't a case switch. I could look up the case switch in Syntax and Writer right now, actually. I kind of want to. Give me 2 seconds. You'd think that, like, by now I would just know how to write a case switch statement, but I'm dumb. Switch. Input. Oh, wait, it's because it's a function, right? I'm sure there's a way I can write this, but I'm not going to use my brain for this right now. I imagine it's not that difficult. You just need to pass in what spell. You need to check for the spell. Yeah, it's probably an easy way to do it. Anyway, I'm going to gloss over it for the moment. But yeah, this is just checking if we're pressing any of the spell buttons. The next function we look at is the gravity function. Now, the gravity function will attempt to reduce your vertical speed by gravity. And in fact, we're setting that in the physics class. So that is configurable here. We could change the gravity if we wanted the user to fall faster, basically. If the down hit collider isn't null, so all this means is if there's actually ground beneath us, then check if we're going to hit the ground. And if we are going to hit the ground, set our vertical speed to 0 because we're going to hit the floor, and then set our vertical position to be in line with that position on the ground, basically. Is all we do here. And yeah, I've noted if there's not ground under us, then somehow we got out of bounds and we should probably stop the player from falling. And if I hop back to Unity for just a second. Oh, okay. Well, that entire section, I didn't have the screen up. Okay, that's cool. That's going to have to be something I get used to. Hopefully I won't do that too much. I didn't go over too much here, so it's not a big deal. We're checking for key casts here, as I mentioned, and this is the gravity function. Reduce speed by gravity. Check if there's actually ground underneath us. If there's not ground underneath us, we got out of bounds and stop falling and set our speed to 0. Okay, whoopsie days. I'll try not to do that. It's just something that I will get used to, no doubt. Now, what I wanted to show is if I boot up the game real quick, basically, there's only ground along this platform. If I walk out to the right, you'll see that I don't fall here. And that's because of that line in the code that's saying, hey, somehow we're out of bounds. Set our vertical speed to 0. We shouldn't fall if we're out of bounds. We're just gonna float. Now, technically, how you handle out of bounds is like completely up to you as a dev, because the player shouldn't even be able to reach it, but that doesn't stop it from happening. I mean, I'm sure you've seen hundreds of speedruns where players just go out of bounds and skip through a bunch of the level. Like, it's a pretty normal thing to happen. One thing to note, when I'm out of bounds, I can't jump. And the reason I can't jump is because when I try to jump, it sets my vertical speed to 0. So it doesn't actually let me. Another thing is if I jump into out of bounds, I'll kind of like jump up higher into out of bounds. And then I can like go out of bounds and back in. And I can like kind of shimmy down. It's kind of me trying to figure out where the edge of the out of bounds is. But yeah, I can do like that. Yeah, just like neat things. It's not really that relevant to the actual game, but you know, there it is. Oh, this is a much better way of doing it. Okay, I figured out a better way of me opening and closing this Visual Studio, so that's cool. Okay. Next, gravity. Cool. We do a ceiling and a wall check. It's kind of the same thing, so I'm not going to go over it. It's like gravity, except rather than doing this speed reduction thing, it's just doing the check to see if we're going to run into the thing. So if we're going to run into the ceiling, because our vertical speed says we are, then instead of running into the ceiling, set our vertical speed to 0 and set our vertical position to be right under the ceiling. So we bonk our head into the roof. And it's the same thing with the wall. The only difference with the walls, we have to check for the left and for the right, but yeah, it's the same thing. Those are both pretty simple. And then the last real physics check is drag. I shouldn't really say this is a check. It's just applying drag. If we're moving left, then reduce our speed by drag. And make sure it doesn't go into negative speed. So if I'm moving left, don't make it so that like drag pushes me right because I'm barely moving. And the same thing, if I'm moving right, then I should be constantly being slowed down. And if I run the game, that's pretty evident. If I just hold down the button and let go, you'll see I kind of slide to a stop a bit. Some games don't use this at all. If I just keep comparing to Hollow Knight has no drag value in the slightest. In that game, the moment you stop moving is the moment, or the moment you let go of the key is the moment that the character stops moving. And that's one way you can do it. I like to have just a little bit of drag on my characters. I think it feels a bit more natural to have a tiny bit of drag. If you have too much drag, it feels like you're playing with ice physics, and a lot of people really don't like ice physics. So, you know, leave that for the ice levels. So I like just a tiny bit for slowing down. Okay. Now, I need to kind of speed up through this review. We have a top speed value, and this just checks that we know we're not exceeding the top speed in any direction, and if we are, set our speed to be the top speed. This is pretty straightforward. Off the top of my head, I don't really think that this is abusable in any way, but I'm sure someone can be like, no, Snowy, you're a dumbass. You can easily generate infinite speed by doing this, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, so you can. And then lastly, we have this regain mana function. This is very straightforward. I've actually said that this is every 6 frames, which I should change this to be a time-based thing when I make the update function fixed update. Okay, but yeah, we've basically gone through all the physics, all the player behavior and stuff. Let's get into the actual interesting shit, which is the spells. Unless I want to go through anything else. I think it's just spells. We don't really care about UI. I do have an enemy script for dummy. What does the enemy script have? Nothing. Doesn't put anything in it. Cool. Some particle scripts. I'm not going to bother looking at those. We're just going to go into spells. Okay, so I have currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 spells coded into the game. We will look at them in order. So starting with... Actually, what I should look is the actual spell class. This is the important one. So actually there's 8 spells and then there's a parent spell class. Now, every spell has a bunch of values that kind of define how the spell works. So they all reference the player, and that's what happens when the spell is instantiated. When the spell script's instantiated, it goes and finds the player object. Talking is hard, you know. Every spell's a mana cost, and I do not give this a default value. By default, you just have to give every spell a mana cost. That just is how it is. Every spell, I say every spell has a delay, but technically the default value for delay is 0. That's because actually most spells don't have a delay. They're just auto fire. Now... for example, the pea shooter, the basic like pew 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 spell has no delay on it. You just press the button and it instantly fires the spell, which is why the default I have set for these is 0. Same with cooldown. By default, spells don't have a cooldown. It's 0, but you can give spells a cooldown. Most spells do have one of some amount. The ready ball, I don't remember what we use it for. It just checks if the spell's off cooldown. Oh, okay. So once the cooldown elapses, it will set the ready back to true. So when you cast the spell, it sets ready to false. So when cooldown elapses, it's set back to true again. And then lastly, I have a boolean that basically just says whether or not the spell is a channeled spell. The 2 spells in the game at the moment that are channeled are the wall, because to cast the wall, you kind of have to like make that little indicator thing show up, and then the flamethrower requires you to channel it as well. Oh, actually, the heal is also channeled. So there's a few spells that are channeled at the moment. And then which key corresponds to the spell. Now, in the constructor... Sorry, not the constructor, actually. This is not the constructor. It's the start function. So this function is ran when the game objects, or when this class is instantiated in the game. And all it's doing is assigning the player. I do nothing in the update function. In the cast function, we do a bunch of crap. So we check what key are we using for the spell. We check, is the spell ready to use? If it's not ready to use, then just drop out of the function. Don't actually cast the spell. Do we have enough mana to cast the spell? If we don't have enough mana to cast the spell, don't cast the spell. If it's a channeled spell, then we have to immediately stop the player from moving while we're holding it. So we set this can move boolean to false. And that's going to stop a whole bunch of stuff in the player script. If I look at where this can move value is being used, yeah, it basically stops all of this, well, most things, basically. Should this... Oh, I wonder if that's why. I guess the reason that I had a second if statement in here is because this can move boolean can change between these two things running, which makes sense now. Okay, once again, I haven't credited 4 years ago me enough. This just looks really dumb, but in actuality, what's happening here is that this check inputs as part of this function running. This can move boolean can update to no longer be true anymore, which is why we check it immediately again before running any of the physics stuff, which is what we're doing here, because if it's a channeled spell, then we can't move anymore. So don't go ahead and run a bunch of physics crap, because you shouldn't be able to. Because you're channeling. Okay, and then it sets our speed manually to be 0, 0. Finally, after all this stuff happens, we say, hey, we're casting, and we're no longer ready to cast a spell. And then we start the delay coroutine. Now, all this is going to do is wait until the spell is ready to fire. So we're going to wait for the delay. The delay is what we actually assign to the spell. And then once... Oh, yeah, the other thing we do is if it's a channeled spell and we've let go of the key we're supposed to be using, then we basically cancel out of the spell. So that's what this is doing over here. Otherwise, we wait for the delay. The player is now no longer casting because the delay's elapsed. We then subtract the mana cost, we execute the spell, and then we initiate the cooldown coroutine. And all this is going to do is determine how long the player has to wait before they can cast that spell again. And that's what that cooldown is. And once this is elapsed, we just set the ready value to true. So we're ready to fire another spell. Okay, so this is the spell parent class, and all spells will inherit from this. So let's take a look at the dash. In fact, I kind of want to look at Peashooter first, because that is actually the first spell. Alright, so the Peashooter spell, if I... Let's just pop into Unity real fast. Peashooter is this spell right here. It's pew, 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 pew. It's your basic Mega Man shooty gun. It fires a tiny projectile that does very little damage. It costs very little mana. And there's technically no cooldown on this spell, so you can fire it as fast as you can mash, basically. Of course, only once every 2 frames, but other than that, there's no restriction. You can't hold the key down because what we're actually checking for on player input is that the key has been pressed that frame. So you have to let go of the key and press it again to fire again. And yeah, you can see the Peashooter does 2 damage. Not that that actually matters. But, okay, so the things to note are there is no cooldown to the spell. There is no delay to this spell. When I press the button, it instantly fires. The mana cost is 5. And I don't think there's anything else too interesting about it. It instantiates a projectile, which we'll look at in a moment. But basically, this is in the start of this script, we assign all these values. Now, I would probably update these, I think, at some point to be configurable elsewhere, but for the time being, it's fine. This is where I'm setting them in the game, but yeah, like I could do the same thing with the physics script where I can make it editable in the editor. But for now, whatever, that's all good. So we override the execute function of the parent spell, which is just an abstract function on the parent spell, but the execute actually determines what happens when we fire the spell. So you can see here the execute function is called after the delay is up, and assuming that we didn't cancel out because it was a channel, then we execute it after subtracting the mana. So for the Peashooter, it's pretty straightforward. Oh, that's actually something I didn't even know, but apparently I can shoot 45 degrees, and I can shoot vertically as well. It's very, like, Super Metroid controls for this. Like, I have to run and hold up to shoot diagonally. I can't, like, do it while standing still. Actually, in that case, it's not even Super Metroid because you have a shoulder bump. But anyway, doesn't really matter. Yeah, I have to do like this to shoot diagonally. And you can see it, like, shoots out. Oh, it actually does shoot out of the corner of my hitbox. It just doesn't look like it when I'm moving. But anyway. And then we also determine the speed of the projectile, I believe. Switches speed divided by ratio. Oh, no, this is... Okay, I'm dumb. I should read my own comments. Get the speed on a 45-degree angle. So the speed of the bullet has to change depending on if it's going like directly in one direction or if it's going diagonally. We have to do some Pythagoras theorem, which is this. Yeah, just some basic math. Okay, moving on. Check which direction to fire the projectile, instantiate it, and then add the speed. So we check what way are we facing, and we base that based off of what keys are we holding. Played off key, played at right key. What do we do if we're not holding a key? Okay, so the first thing I do is I check if I'm holding up. If I'm holding up, then I'll shoot it directly up. If I'm holding up and right, I'll shoot it diagonally up right. Up and left, I'll shoot it diagonally up left. Now, if I'm holding down... Oh, if I... Oh my god, look at this. Look, I like wrote stuff for this. So if I'm on the ground, right, and I'm holding down and right, it'll shoot straight. But if I jump and do it, I can technically shoot downwards like this, which is kind of neat. And you'll see all my projectiles are getting stuck on the floor. And that's because I think they're just not coded to interact with ground hitboxes. So that's why that's happening. And in fact, Unity's whining about null reference exceptions here as well. Because it doesn't know what to do. But yeah, anyway, that's fine. You don't have to worry about that. It's not crashing the game. And then lastly, we check which way we're facing, and that's the direction we instantiated it. Okay, so that's the pea shooter. Pretty straightforward. All that you really need to do is just determine where we're going to spawn the projectile from and how much speed it should have. Like, what vector should it be moving in. And then lastly, it will move in that direction. And does this also inherit from the projectile, which is up here, which is P, has an update. And I need to move all this to fixed update as well, but that's fine. It's a projectile. It has a bunch of layer masks. This is what it's allowed to collide with. Which it does have the ground one here, so I don't know why it's... I'll have to look at why it's throwing things at me. If it's enemy or if it's terrain, then destroy it. So I guess if I swap this to ground, maybe. I don't know. Anyway. Update. Yeah, nothing too interesting here. Oh yeah, also if the projectile goes off screen, we despawn it as well. So yeah, I guess what's interesting to note here is like, I mean, the update is just move the projectile, but we have these two to determine when we should delete the object. So if the object goes off screen, we don't allow it to continue traveling, it just deletes, which means technically if there's like an enemy that's just off screen, then you have to be on screen to shoot it, which I would potentially change going forwards. That's just what I have in here for now, so that I don't have a bunch of projectiles flying around indefinitely. And we also destroy the projectile if it collides with an enemy or if it collides with anything tagged with terrain. And I suspect actually the reason that this null reference is happening is because it's hitting this hitbox. Oh, this is also tagged with terrain. Don't know. Just for some reason. I'll take a look at it later. Okay. Anyway, so that's the pea shooter. The next spell is the... I'll just look at the dash next, I guess. We'll go in order. So dash... dash uses the base instantiate. I think they all use that actually. Pea shooter does as well, right? Yeah, we run the parent spells start as well. The dash has a mana cost of 10 as opposed to the pea shooter's 5. It doesn't have a cooldown. Oh, my pea shooter does have a cooldown. There you go. Okay, the dash does not, though. You can actually spam the dash. The notable thing about the dash, though, which we'll see in a second here, actually, is that it sets the player's speed to a flat vector. So in this case, it's going to set it to a flat 4, meaning that you can technically exceed the max speed with it, I believe, because 4 is greater than the player's max horizontal speed. But I'm going to have to look at how that works, actually. How does it exceed the speed gap? Surely I have something in there. But it just sets your speed flat to 4. So if you like spam the dash button, even though there's no cooldown for it, bloop bloop. Even though there's no cooldown for it, you won't like stack and go faster and faster and faster. It just sets you to 4. And it also prevents you from moving while you're dashing. So you can't do anything else. Now, what I want to know is if I go into... And like the reason for that is you can't like jump and dash. When you press the dash button, you're locked into the dash until the dash completes. Let me close some of these. If not can move, then we don't calculate drag or gravity. So there you go. That's why. And top speed. So that's why it ignores the speed limit, because it waits until you're done before it checks for the max speed. Okay. And then once it's finished, which is 0.1 of a second, it allows you to move again. And if I hop back into the game, we can demo this. It's why we like stop falling midair when I press the dash button, because we basically stop doing any physics checking while we're dashing. I'm trying to think. No, we would still check if we're colliding with a wall. I don't have... Oh, actually, I can make a wall. I can literally test it. I was like, I don't have a wall, but I can just make one. Would you like to let me make a wall, game? It doesn't want to let me make a wall. There we go, I got it. And then if I dash into the wall, yeah, I do get stopped still. So it still checks collisions. It just doesn't care about your... updating your speed value, basically. Okay, that's the dash spell. That one's also... I mean, that one's even more straightforward than the pea shooter because we're not doing any projectiles or anything. The next spell is our jump spell. Now, the jump spell is the first channeled spell I've got. So it has a mana cost of 20. It has a delay of 0.3, and it is channeled. Now, when we press the cast button, or when we attempt to cast the spell, we have to check the players on the ground. If the player's not on the ground, we don't allow them to begin channeling it, so we break it. Otherwise, we call the cast, and then upon execution, which requires us to have been channeling it for 0.3 of a second, we allow the player to move again. Part of channeling is we prevent the player from moving. So we allow it here. I'm actually wondering if this is required. If we're channeled and we stop it, then the player's allowed to move. Okay, we do have to manually in the spell say the player can move upon executing. Okay. And then we set their vertical speed to be 8. We shoot them up really fast. Now, why is this one not hitting the speed cap? Is my next question. We're reviewing this together. So, I execute the spell. I jump up with a speed of 8. And I'm checking my top speed. Where is it? Top speed only checks horizontal speed. There you go. So we actually don't cap our vertical speed, which I'm sure is not a concern whatsoever. Yeah, I would probably want some check on that, but I don't. That's fine. So I can demo this spell. It is this one. Pew. I got catapulted into the air after 0.3 seconds. I can't move until... Oh, now I'm in the floor. Lovely. Yeah, okay. And this is where the physics still needs a bit of work. mainly with the colliders I need to fix. It might just be fixed by making the hitboxes bigger, I don't know. Reloading domain. Oh, my Unity's shitting bricks. Okay, it's back. Alright. Hold the button, catapult myself upwards at a very high speed. Okay, that's the jump spell. If I go back to it, again, very, very simple. The only interesting thing about this spell is we have a delay on it. And it's a channeled spell. Okay. So what else do I have? The next spell is Wall, and we have seen Wall. I've used it a little bit already. Now, Wall is the most involved spell here because it involves instantiating an object that also has collision. Okay, so what do we have? As a mana cost of 30, a delay of 0.3, and the delay determines when the little indicator starts popping up. It's a channeled spell. And we have to get some... Yeah, okay, there's a lot of crap in here. Basically, we check if we're channeling. Because if we're not channeling, we don't do any of this stuff. We do nothing. Now, this indicator corresponds to... I can show you actually real fast. The indicator is this little brown particle thing here. That's what the indicator is. And when I let go of the button, it will create a wall where the indicator is. So as long as the indicator isn't null, we check that we're still channeling. So we check we're still holding down the key and that we're grounded. And then we check if we're holding a direction. Because if we're holding a direction, we want to move the indicator, basically. And as part of moving the indicator, we need to make sure that there's no walls in the way of the indicator. So this is kind of like instead of moving the player, we're now moving the indicator instead. And we can do this because the player is now movement locked while channeling the spell. So I go from controlling the player to control the indicator. And all we're doing here is the indicator has its own set of collisions that prevents it from moving into walls and whatnot. And we do the same set for if we're holding left instead of holding right. Okay. If we're not still channeling, then what we want to do is execute the spell. We're no longer channeling, the player's allowed to move, the player's regen gets hard set here. Now this is actually really bad. We should not be setting the player's regen. We should definitely have a boolean that just says whether or not we are able to regen. Because setting the player's regen to a static value is just dumb. And then we create a wall. So we instantiate the wall. And I'll briefly look through the wall class in a moment, but it's kind of yeah, it's kind of a lot. We will stop the particles from appearing when we spawn the wall, and we destroy the indicator object as well. Okay. I have one more else statement here, which is if the indicator is null, which I'm trying to... I don't know why. This is probably just a failsafe to restore the player state. But technically we shouldn't be hitting this else statement, I don't think. And then the cast, check that we're on the ground. If we're not grounded, don't cast the spell. And also check if we're standing on a spawned wall. I'm trying to think of the reason why we do that. I think it's because I don't allow the player to create a wall on top of another wall. Because you could use that to pretty easily get like infinite height, which I would not want. And that's what it does here. Yeah, it sees, all right, ray cast below me. If the thing below me is a wall, or clone in this case, then don't cast the spell. And assuming that we are grounded and we're not staying on a wall, then cast the spell. The execution of the spell is setting channeling to true. The player's mana regen gets set to 0. Again, not what I should be doing here, but it's what we have. Oh, worth noting that this is getting called every frame, every update. Should I be doing this? This is probably bad as well. Because it's basically always coming back to this channeling and seeing that, hey, we're not channeling until we press the key. Which means every frame it's executing this if statement. It's not great. The wall spell, I probably need to rethink how it's running. But, okay. Regardless, for now, I'll leave it. When we execute the spell, we do some stuff. This is just determining... This is determining where the indicator will spawn when we execute the spell, basically. And if we have a valid position, spawn the indicator. That's all it does. And then once we've spawned the indicator, now this update section comes into play, where it sees the indicator is no longer null, so it's going to start running this stuff instead. But again, I don't know if that's actually a good idea. But also, how would I do it? How else would I do it? I don't know. Anyway, I will leave it at that. I think I can bundle these if statements into one. No, I can't. Because this if has an else. Alright. And then if I quickly go to the wall class, we'll take a quick look at it. The wall class has a bunch of stuff. It despawns after 5 seconds. The big thing about the wall is that I need to... When the wall spawns, it like grows. It gets bigger, right? And part of... And that's what this is doing. Change the height of the wall. I basically need to scale the wall up. And then I also need to move the position based on the scaling. Sets a temporary value for the previous height of the wall. Temp. Okay, I don't know the order in which I'm doing this. This is checking the wall's previous height. So like this value is equivalent to the top of the wall previously, I believe. Probably. Get component. Yeah, I mean, well, actually, it literally says that. Set September over the previous height of the wall. And then we use that later when we're pushing. So if I... Basically, what this allows is... If I pop back into the game, if I spawn the wall below me, for instance, the wall is going to push me up. And the way that this... Oh, I can even use it on the... I didn't even know I could use it on the dummies, but there you go. It actually does work like that. That's pretty cool. I mean, the dummies don't fall because they don't have gravity, but I can lift them. I didn't even know I could do that. But yeah, it pushes all objects upwards based on that. Because it's going to box... Okay, so the difference between box cast and box cast all is the box cast all is going to get all objects in the way. I think you define a vector that the box cast fires in. So, like, with the previous box casts, like if I go back to my player class here, and we take a look at these box casts, we fire them for infinity, I believe. Yeah. They have an infinity distance, but for the wall one, we actually don't want to fire it for infinity. We just want to fire it on this wall increment, and this wall increment is the height the wall is going to gain, basically. So rather than box casting for infinity, we just want to see, hey, what are all the objects that were in between where the wall was previously and the wall was now? And for each of those objects, push them up a little bit, change their Y value. Okay. That's the wall. We have a lot more. And I don't think I'm going to go through all of them. Because it's well, not all of them tonight anyway. Because I don't want to be doing this for like forever. I think what I will do is I'm going to demo some of... I've kind of gone through most of them anyway. Look, the heal is very simple. The heal just heals you if you've taken damage. It's pretty straightforward. It's also using this update channeling thing. I have to look and see if there's a better way I can do this. Because I'm looking at this now and I'm like, this does not seem like a great way to handle these spells. I shouldn't have to be checking every single frame if I'm channeling the spell. Probably. To execute them, that just kind of seems dumb. But maybe that's what I have to do. I don't know. I'll have to think on that a bit, I think. I think I'll have to think on that a bit. Good on me. Okay, yeah, the heal is... And I think... actually, I don't have the heal assigned to a spell, do I? But I want to assign some of the other ones. Okay, we've seen the flamethrower. That's one of the cool ones. If I go back to the game, I can show the flamethrower real quick as well. So that's this. We can shoot a flamethrower up, and then you can see it ticks and burns for a bit. Actually, it's definitely more than 3. It looks like it's like 5 to 10, somewhere in there. Yeah, the flamethrower is pretty sick. Now, also a channeled spell. This one's actually not too crazy. It's just about instantiating the particle system, which is the fire that shoots out. We've got some deprecated code here, apparently. Use emission.rate over time. I will do that right now. Wait, what? Use emission.rate over time. Particle system.emission rate. Alright, I'll look into it. Actually, if I just do this. Nope. Okay. Visual Studio will not help me, but I'm sure I can fix that later. So I guess the last 2 spells I haven't really demoed are the Fireball and the Chain. Chain is pretty cool, actually. Fireball instantiates just a projectile. Now, the interesting thing about the Fireball is that it has an arc based on gravity, and it changes depending on what direction you're holding. So what I'll do is I'll give the player actually... let's just put Fireball here. F1 Fireball. And I will put L1 Chain here. Like so. Okay, and then I'll go back into Unity and we'll just restart the scene. Okay, so the Fireball, if I just press the button, it has a slight delay on it, and then it shoots out a Fireball. The Fireball explodes and does like AoE fire damage. If I hold up, it will shoot the Fireball directly upwards. If I hold up right... Oh, I have to... Oh, okay, I forgot. So the Fireball actually doesn't lock my movement, but it does have a delay. So I want to see if I can throw it up right. Does it just throw it straight up? It does, okay. We probably want to change that, but that's fine. If I'm holding right when I do it, I think it's the same as just a straight one. If I hold down, I thought there was a way to throw it at like a better angle, but I guess not. Okay, I guess the only way you can lob it is up. What if I'm jumping when I do it? Okay, I can throw it down. Can I throw it diagonally? I guess not. Okay. Oh, I can throw it up. You can throw it down. And you can throw it left and right. Okay. I think I would add like more variable lobbing. Like if I'm holding down while on the ground, it would probably be like more of a straight shot than an arc. Or just a lower arc, basically. And then my final spell, which is the lightning one, which actually does have a little bit of code to it. Probably one of the more interesting spells. It's just a chain lightning. So it's going to fire out a projectile, which kind of is like this little zigzaggy lightning bolt. And then the interesting thing is that like once we actually... Where do I do it? Oh, it must be on the projectile itself. If I go to the chain. So on the actual projectile, we'll see when it hits an object, it's going to go ahead. Wait, hold on. Why didn't I put comments on this? Oh, it does it down here. Okay, this is the update. And it's throwing a circle cast. And it's doing some crap. Okay. If count is equal to 15. Alright, it's been so long since I looked at this card. I do not remember. When the projectile goes off screen, yeah, obviously. Okay. So here's the collision for it. If it collides with terrain, destroy it. If it collides with an enemy, however, the first thing it does is deals 10 damage to the enemy. Then it removes... Oh, okay. Okay. Where do I set this? Right. Okay, so what we do, when we instantiate the lightning bolt takes note of every single enemy that is on the screen. It finds all game objects tagged enemy. And then when it collides with an enemy, it removes that enemy from the list. Or it deals 10 damage to it, removes it from the list, and then it finds a new target to path to. And it will basically like home in on that target. And that's what this chain path function does, actually. Which we'll see it in action in just a second. For each game object and targets, we're going to increase the count. The count's the amount of targets we have. We're going to add... And it does some recursive crap. So... Okay, I wrote some, like... This is just not being used. Okay, I don't know. This means I probably should have looked at this code beforehand. All right. What an incredible stream experience I'm providing right now. Should I figure out what this does? I didn't comment any of this. Are we for real? Also more emission rate stuff. How does this work? Okay, let's just try and dissect this together, shall we? So, on spawning, we get the bullet mask. We get the particle system. The period. Init position, period, count, amplitude. Holy shit, I'm doing math in this function. What the heck? I'm like doing some awk crap. Did I actually like... Man, I put way too much effort into this thing. I remember this being like the last thing I worked on before I stopped the project, I think. This is like the last spell that I made. Amplitude small chain. Here's the projectiles. For each game object G in game object.find game object enemies with tagged enemy. So I mean, like, okay, here's one thing that like I can immediately see as an issue right now. If I'm basing my potential chain list off of enemies that exist when I cast the spell, if an enemy were to die after that, that enemy's technically still in the list, I think. And I don't want to be able to like chain to a dead enemy. So you'd have to like remove the enemy from the list if it died, but how do you do that? Sure, there are ways. And the update is determining new position is equal to initial position plus period. Sorry, initial position plus period times count plus amplitude. And it's a vector 2. Are these all vector 2s? Count is an int. Oh, because it's period times count, right? Yeah. And then plus init plus amplitude. Holy crap, I did some stuff here. I don't know if there's anything. Hit is equal to physics2d.circlecast. I think this is just checking if I've collided with anything. Oh no, this is this is just checking if my chain lightning is going to collide with something, in which case it will stop it short. That's all that does. And then if count is equal to 15, I don't know what's incrementing count. Apparently, if it's equal to 15, count plus equals 1. And then amplitude is reset. Count is equal to 16. We detach particles, destroy the game object. It's because it does this thing. Which I know is bad because I haven't even shown the spell yet. I should probably show the spell. Else count plus equals 2, amplitude times equals -1. Flips. If we collide with terrain, destroy the lightning. That makes sense. If we collide with enemy, have the enemy take 10 damage, remove the enemy from my list, and then call the chain path function. Now, the chain path function instantiates a count, gets a list of targets, or actually instantiates a new list called targets for each game object in enemies, which is no longer going to include the one that we've already hit. Check the distance. And if it's within range, which is 2F, then add the enemy as a potential target. Now, what this means is I could potentially have like 3 enemies in range of the initial enemy that I hit. So they're all potential targets. But now what we do is we add them to the temp path, remove them from the enemy list, and then call chain path again. And then after we're done, we re-add the enemy, and we remove it from the temp path list. If the count equals 0, so this is the potential targets. If there's no targets left, then the temp path dot count. Oh, and we check that the temp path dot count is greater than the path count. Temp path dot count. Holy shit, I'm going insane. Where is temp path? Temp path and path are both lists of game objects. Okay, so they're both lists. If there's more in temp path than there is in path, then clear the path and add all the objects from temp path into path, because that becomes the new path. Right. And there's probably a better way of actually doing this. So you can't do path is equal to temp path, because then when you change temp path later, it's a reference assignment. But there is probably a better way to instantiate a new list of objects to be the same as this without doing a for each loop here. I'm fairly certain you can do that in C#. There's some chain delay function I'm not using. So basically all this does at the end of the day is it determines the path in which the chain lightning will go through all the enemies, in which it hits the most number of enemies, and then it selects that path. That is what this does. And then if the path.count is greater than 0, then set the next target to be path 0, and then remove the next target. And then it will collide with that target, and it will do it again. Is how I believe that works. And then each time it runs through it again, it'll call chain path again, but now it's already got the path. Probably a really inefficient way of writing this. Okay. I'm gonna show the spell because I haven't actually done that yet. So here's what it looks like. It's a little lightning bolt thing. I can shoot it in multiple directions. Pew, pew, pew. And if I fire the lightning bolt into this, you'll see it'll chain through all the enemies. I think it will always chain through the same way. It will depend on which enemy I hit with it. But yeah, we can see it zips around between all the different ones, which is pretty cool. It has a delay on the first enemy being hit for whatever reason. But after that, it kind of chains through all of them. So yeah, pretty happy with how that one actually comes out. I think it has to be a little faster, probably because if the enemies are moving, I don't think it will home in on them. So I think an enemy could potentially dodge it, more or less. So you'd have to add in some homing feature where it constantly updates where it's going. Also, apparently I can hit multiple enemies with it at once. Does it have a cooldown? It does, but it's pretty low. Yeah, you can spam it and it'll zap between them all. Okay, and with that is all the spells that I have coded. for this little platformer demo. So I guess that's kind of like just a showcase of what the game has thus far. It's very, very bare bones, very demo. Very like, pre-alpha. A lot of stuff is not very well written. Not surprising. Again, how all these channel spells work, not ideal. I'm sure that's just adding a bunch of complexity to the updates functions, because it's checking for that stuff every single frame, I'm pretty sure. If I look at my player class has a list of all these scripts, and these scripts are running their update functions every frame, and it's probably not ideal that I'm doing a bunch of if evaluations every frame, but I don't know, on the other hand, maybe it is fine. Yeah, so I was thinking I was going to do a bit more updating, but the stuff that I did change, I figured out that I actually didn't want to change. So yeah, tomorrow I'm going to stream again, and the agenda will be attempting to swap over to fixed update and fixing a lot of these raycast issues. So if I use the jump spell, like sometimes you'll see when I use the jump spell, I get stuck on the floor. Hasn't happened yet, but yeah, like even there, I was like kind of stuck. It can happen. It's just kind of rare, but if I change it, if I swap the fixed update, it happens all the time, and even happens on the regular jump. So with the current physics, the regular jump is is pretty good. The big jump occasionally gets stuck on the floor, but it's pretty rare. But when I swap the physics to the fixed update, it happens way more frequently, meaning there's something not hot going on that I need to figure out and fix. But that is fine. We'll resolve that later. So yeah, that's the agenda for tomorrow. We're going to actually do some coding. And we'll try and get our physics to be a little, or just try and get it frame independent is the goal. And then from there, I can start doing some actual game design stuff. We'll probably look at the spells I've got and look at how many spells I want to implement and ideas for them and what I can do. So maybe a little less coding focused after we fix the physics up. And we'll see where we go from there. At some point, I probably want to make some more dynamic environments or enemies or something as well. I mean, I'll be using super basic placeholder art, but we'll see how that goes. Okay, I think that's about it. That's all I'm going to do for tonight. Thanks anyone who stopped by for tuning in. Again, if this randomly does kick off and 5 years from now, I'm actually, I mean, let's be honest, no one's going to watch this hour 43-minute video of me rambling, and it's really garbage. But I don't know. I just love that you can go back and look at Day 9 Daily #1 and be like, holy shit, everyone starts somewhere, dude. It'd be so funny if this was something that people looked back on later. Not that I think it's likely, but the record is there. I'm going to stop the stream and upload this as a VOD, raw, uncut. It's just going to go up on my YouTube channel. Almost 2-hour VOD. And my plan is to do that for every single one. So, yes, that is that. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll catch you all tomorrow night. Have a good one.